welcome back to Block TV. Time for Chainbreakers, where we speak to the people who play an intrinsic part in the blockchain and cryptocurrency ecosystem. And today, very happy to be joined from Hudson Valley, New York, by Nathaniel Whitmore, who can be described as one of the main chroniclers of the space with his trademark Long Read Sunday Twitter column and extensive writings on Medium. Nathaniel is one of the people who focuses on the long-term trends and developments of the space, always offering great insights into the subject matter. Nathaniel, thank you so much for joining us this morning for you. And I've got to start. Yeah. Hello. Yes. By the way, I love that you just woke up, because I really think you just woke up, right?
I've actually been up for a little while with the new baby.
It's exactly.
She's on an early schedule.
It's worth the non-sleep, but get used to it. Now, asking you though, let's start off right off the gate. At the end of the day, I cannot ignore the fact that we're sitting here at the end of about 24, almost 48 hours of a green sea, so to speak, with the spike, well, at the time of the recording this, we're standing on the 5,000 mark for Bitcoin. Do you think people in the space, because never mind the reasoning behind it, we can theorize, what a bull rally or trap can be, but what do you think? Because you've been watching the people in the space, okay? Are they feeling vindicated in your mind?
Maybe preemptively so.
Okay.
I think my concern is that there's such a huge amount of pent-up energy and excitement that such a bump it's unleashing a lot of energy that's good, and that's people are excited, and reasonably so. However, I do bit that like you said, it's been 48 hours ish, and that's not long enough for me to sort of start writing, blaring the trumpets and calling the return of the bull market. Now, there's a lot of people who are a lot better than I am at understanding actual price action and market movements, who have been expecting this and anticipating it. So I'm not throwing water on it or saying I have some insight. I just think that, at the end of the day, price movement doesn't change the thing which I think is explaining the pent-up excitement, which is the fundamentals of this industry getting better and better and better, unceasingly, despite kind of the low prices that we've had for the last year.
Now, entirely and well put. Let's go back to you, because at the end of the day, Long Read Sunday, I'm going to describe you, and this is just me saying it, you're kind of like the New Yorker of the sphere. In that respect, when we're looking at the narratives and the essays, I want to start with, how did you even jump on the blockchain train? Where did you come from? And mostly, you spent some time in advertising, didn't you?
Yeah, so I have a kind of an interesting background. So I spent about a decade in San Francisco before moving over kind of to the boonies in Hudson Valley. And while I was in San Francisco, I was kind of switching back and forth between operator type roles and venture capital roles. And the common thread for all of them was looking at the market from 10,000, 20,000 feet and trying to understand where trends were heading. And so as a venture capital, the business model for that is obviously picking your investments. As a marketer, working in startups, the business model for that kind of 20,000 foot view is being able to tell the story of the companies that you're working with. So that was kind of the obvious place in terms of connecting to the technology side of this industry. However, before that, I was actually I built a center that took students all over the world at my university, which was just outside Chicago. And so I thought I was going to do post-conflict stuff and spend my whole life there. And actually, I got pulled into the San Francisco tech world by working with a company that had just started at the time called Change.org, which has gone on to become a very big company. And so the interesting thing for me is that the Bitcoin and crypto space is really kind of a bringing together of those two sides, this interest in changing global systems as well as the technology mechanism to do so.
I'm going to stop you on the do-gooder part, because I've researched you, and you had this moment, I think at a certain point there, correct me if I'm wrong, through advertising, where you're sitting in Selfridges and they want you to build a certain ship, and you're thinking, what the hell am I doing? And clearly with the background, right? Okay, and clearly with the background of wanting to change the world, Change.org definitely has become a household name. How do you see blockchain doing that? How do you see this sphere, first of all, because we're not there yet, is it moving in that direction, and how do you see that connecting?
Yeah, I think so. I spend a lot of time on narratives and what what stories we tell ourselves about the industry. I think they're really powerful. And I think that there is obviously a narrative right now around the idea of Bitcoin as a hedge against unstable monetary regimes, right? If you look at what's happening in Venezuela as the kind of the most off-cited example. And I think it's important to be able to do two things simultaneously. One is to do not overstate the case, right? Venezuela is not going to be fixed by Bitcoin. It's an incredibly complex, borderline failed state now that has a huge amount of work to do on social, political, and economic sides.
Entirely.
However, the thing that to me does not change the fact that for the first time in history, in a situation like that, there was a reasonable exit option that wasn't into another fiat currency or the global reserve currency of USD, where people were actually able to permissionlessly use this new internet money to either get themselves out or help their families. And I think that's a profound thing. So I do think it's headed in the direction, for the first time, state money has competition, and that's kind of just the Bitcoin side and the money side of crypto. I think that the ICO boom may have gotten us off track a little, but I don't think that the ambition to actually kind of decentralize the web and disaggregate network and data monopolies has gone away as a goal. So, that's something that I'm interested to see how that continues to evolve.
No, fascinating. I want to talk to you about that narrative, because at the end of the day, there are many people who are saying for Bitcoin to make it, it has to become institutionalized and move into, become the tool of, and to me that means that it has to become, rich people's money. On the other hand, we've got Venezuela, you've got these places where you can actually, not just decentralize, but actually can save and change, borders. Which narrative do you think at this point in time is making more gains? I agree with you. Bitcoin is still, what as we see as, I don't want to call it freedom, but it's kind of the new, it could be the new future. But we see the old institutions jumping on the train, and they may just use it as a tool. What narrative do you think will prevail?
I don't necessarily think it's an either or. Okay. I think that part of what makes it such a powerful, social economic force is that it's very, very hard to, or if not impossible, to have any one use be owned and captured by any group. That said, I think that of course institutions are going to come in if it's a valuable asset class. Power structures are enormously good at propagating themselves and adapting to new opportunities. So I think for me that to the extent that there is a battle around the question that you're asking, it's more whether cryptocurrency in general is going to prevail as a kind of a permissionless open tool for freedom and privacy and sovereignty, or whether or how much it's going to be used in terms of kind of a state-backed, crypto fiat surveillance regime, because the opportunity is really there, and you're certainly seeing this with digital money around the world. So that's a battle that I think is super interesting and kind of right at the heart of this industry.
And I agree with you that not one needs to, necessarily win and wipe the other one out. I'm wondering though what the percentage will be. You also mentioned, and very true, that the ICO bubble, or that exploded in everybody's faces by the end of the last year. We're seeing another phenomenon here, and that's why I'm going back to the last question, which is now called the IEO, that people would argue is just a different form of an ICO that will also give the sphere a bad name of just a pump and dump type of way. Do you see that happening now? That when it comes to the new form of the new ICO being the new IEO?
Yeah, so I tend to agree with the people who just think it's kind of the same thing with the new dress up. I think it has. I think that the excitement around it expresses the same pent-up demand and excitement that we're seeing with the response to the whole industry going green over the last couple of days. Right. I don't know how much I think. I wonder if it will really be able to get legs under it before it burns itself out. And what I mean by that is that, Binance is kind of a uniquely powerful force in this industry with the capacity to do this. And I think that as you go down the line of exchanges, you might see, the diminishing returns in the results. This is not really a great analogy, but I remember when Y Combinator first kind of popped off and became a thing in Silicon Valley like a decade ago.
Right.
Everyone started an accelerator, right? There was, and startups thought that they had to give 10% of their equity to any accelerator that they could get into. And of course, it's kind of a power law distribution where Y Combinator is still extremely, valuable and influential in the markets. And there's a number of other great accelerators, but they don't necessarily have the same sort of investors are just going to fling money at your company with high valuations.
Exactly.
I wonder if we're going to see a similar distribution of the capacity of these exchanges to do this sort of offering. But
time will tell. Exactly, time will tell. I want to go back to the thing you do, and Long Read Sunday. Crypto Twitter, in a way, has become very, very, very powerful. And Twitter, needless to say, in 2019, we will all agree, is a very powerful sphere that can even spawn presidents. That said, a certain tweet from a certain individual can completely shift the market. Would you agree with that?
I don't know if it can completely tweet, but I do think that narratives propagate extraordinarily quickly because of Twitter. I think in every sphere, but I think especially in niche spheres and strong kind of concentrated communities like crypto. So, I do think that you see, prevailing opinions get distributed very, very quickly. So I don't know if it can fully move a market, but I do think it's a powerful force. I mean, I guess that said, Doge popped off yesterday after Elon Musk tweeted about it. So
exactly,
I think that might be more about the meme value of Doge and Elon, though, than it is about the power of crypto or
Could
Twitter.
be. On the other hand, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, tweeted at the beginning of the week that he's going to shut down the border with Mexico, and avocado prices in the States spiked because it has that capacity in many ways. So I'm wondering.
Yeah, I mean, it's a megaphone for sure. There's no denying that.
And is that why you chose to? I mean, because you play in that sphere and you actually you look at these long trends. First of all, I'd love to hear your, how do you get to the final write-up that you do? How much time do you spend, building those narratives? Yeah, go ahead.
Ask my wife, whose weekend is ruined every weekend because of it. So I think though that the point that you're making is actually relevant in the context of Long Read Sunday, because it's kind of, although there is a newsletter version of it, it's actually pretty avowedly a Twitter native content medium. And that was my goal. And it arose from me watching the exact same thing that you just noted, which is that there was so much, such a high percentage of what I felt like was the insight and interesting ideas in the crypto space were happening, not even in Medium posts and blogs, but actually in Twitter. And in particular, there was kind of the emergence of these threads, which have been around for a while, but really have gained traction over the last couple of years. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. One is that you're going direct to your audience. So you don't have to ask them to click out to something else, which is powerful in terms of getting, that dopamine hit and the feedback loop of engagement. I think the second piece, though, is that it's kind of a lower stakes medium. Like the downside is that they go away kind of fast. The upside is that they go away kind of fast. So people are more willing to try out ideas, although people obviously drag up old tweets all the time. And so Long Read Sunday very much came out of seeing that there wasn't kind of an archive of this particular type of content. And so, so the process is basically all week long, I'm just saving things, that I think are interesting, are going to be relevant. Some that I know right away are going to be on there. More often, this may be a thing. And then kind of Friday or Saturday, I usually start to basically come back to them and think about what the main themes are. And there's actually a lot of work that goes into figuring out how the different dots connect together. And I think that my instinct is that the persistence of the value is, and the reason that people keep coming back to it, I think is as much about tying the threads together and synthesizing as it is the specific content links.
No, entirely. Do you find, though, that this sphere, which, by the way, just as an old school journalist, I'm saying, it is the new platform for journalism in many ways. Are there pitfalls there, though? I mean, maybe not in narratives and long-form narratives in what you do, but you said you spend a lot of time connecting the dots. And, I would argue as devil's advocate that the one problem with Twitter is, be it in threads or whatnot, is that it is hard for us, even though it's an open source, it is hard for us to quantify what is real and what is not, no? Yeah,
well, so this is a much larger structural issue of God, good comes with bad. And I think it's fascinating to me. Crypto is, I think, on the leading edge of a phenomenon, which is going to be a part of every industry,
right.
which is that the semi-professional, let's call them, not amateur, but semi-professional media creators and content creators have more kind of influence, or at least reach in some cases, than the traditional news outlet. Like, right, I don't know right now that there's any more valuable media exposure in terms of kind of fast and impactful than a really big pomp tweet, right? Like, it's got more reach, I think, than most publications, and that might change. But so the good thing about that is that there's this enormous opening for interesting voices that was never there before, right? And this was really the promise of Web 2. The challenge is that everyone gets to create their perfect filter bubbles, and this is certainly not limited to crypto. In any way, but I do think, I think it's interesting that actually the kind of the semi-professional media cadre grew up first, and now you have new market entrants of crypto-focused publications like you guys and the Block and others who are trying to bring that other side. And I think that it's going to be. I'm very optimistic about the state of media because I think it's got this strong base, but it's hungry for. Unbiased might not be the right word, but some amount of traditional journalism too.
No, and I think it definitely does have it. I was thinking also about the users. Let's not even call them audience anymore, because there are no viewers, there are users, and in that respect, just helping them and having those outlets just like yours that, to sift through and know what is legit and what is not. And speaking of which, how you gave us your background and you're in the right sphere, but why did you begin curating what has become your trademark? I mean, was this like a eureka moment, or you just found yourself doing this on your own and then you figured, what the heck, let's turn this into a publication in a way?
I had been experimenting with threads on specific topics, so single issues. So I had done, I've been actually experimenting with the medium for a couple months before I got it. I really had a strong feeling that there was a curation possibility with, threads of threads, basically.
Right.
And so I had done a couple on like crypto M&A and network effects, and they were popular. And then I really had set this goal. It's silly, but I had set this goal of doing one a week, and it came to Sunday, and I was like, I just don't have anything. But I was sitting there in bed, reading through the news, and I was like, maybe I'll just try this week to do one that's really just kind of the week's news. And it was instantly more popular than any of the other ones that I had done. So so I just kind of went with it.
No, amen. Now, finally, last but not least, do you know what you're doing this weekend? That sounds suggestive, yeah. I know. But that's it. I mean, what are we looking at this week when it comes to the thread?
Well, unfortunately, I guess fortunately too, I'm not going to be able to ignore the price action. It's too big a context for everything. It's been, I do think that it's obviously good for the industry for these assets to continue to rise in price, and so I don't want to be a curmudgeon about it, but I do think that there's something that gets a little lost when all of our conversation is about price.
About money.
That's the nice side of kind of a more quiet market. So, anyways, we will definitely talk about that. I think for me, it's almost like there's categories that I look for in my head, like what's going on with kind of a macro context. So I'm always tracking to see what U.S. presidential candidates are talking about, if anything, in crypto. What is the latest conversations around things like MMT and modern monetary theory in the Fed? So that's one domain. I kind of always look at the international context to see whether there has been sort of meaningful movement on that side. You have the whole DeFi community. You have Ethereum kind of, figuring out how to handle the fact that there's now a million competitors.
Yep.
And, it's much more complex. So I think the one thing that's for sure this week so far is that we will explore, this price movement and why it might have happened. And then I'll probably get on my high horse and say, but we shouldn't focus too much on it.
Exactly. But once again, it is the talk of the town. That said, very recommended. As we said, I want to thank you so much, Nathaniel Whitmore, with us today from Hudson Valley in New York. He is the man, the mind, the brain behind Long Read Sunday. Thank you for being with us. Do not forget also not to check out Long Read Sunday, but also BLOCKTV. We're everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, Telegram. Send us questions. We do answer, and we will be right back.